Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. This is the Amateur Otaku podcast where we talk all things in the world of anime, manga, and honestly everything in between. Joining me, of course, is the Mad Doc himself, Isaac Wolf. I'm your host, novice cinephile Michael Thomas. Isaac, how you been, man?
I'm tired in this horrible heat. It's like I'm from Sweden and not Australia or Spain. I need my 5 minutes, -5 Fahrenheit snowstorm.
Yeah, for those listening, Isaac is currently in the middle of a heat wave. It was like what 100 degrees Fahrenheit
100
today or so.
104.
Yeah, steamy there in Sweden.
And it's in England. It's been about 104 around Europe. It's the first time in known history that England has had this hot in a summer. So
That is wild. Well, hopefully you're finding a way to stay cool because we've got to talk another Studio Ghibli movie, right? Am I correct
yeah,
there?
yep,
Yes.
and it's a very special one. I would say. No, but not in the whole special, as in Princess Mononoke or Spirited Away, but it's how it's present itself, don't you think?
I'd say so. For those listening, we are talking about The Tale of Princess Kaguya. This movie came out in 2013, and it's about a tiny nymph found inside a bamboo stalk, and it grows into a beautiful and desirable young woman who orders her suitors to prove their love by completing a series of near impossible tasks. That's what the synopsis says. Isaac, what was your first experience with The Tale of Princess Kaguya? Like, did you watch it like as soon as it came out? Did you wait a few years?
I can't recall what year I was watching it, but
Mhm.
it was a time when I was my own movie blog that I wrote in Swedish, that I sort of like had a Studio Ghibli marathon, and each day I covered a new Ghibli movie, so to speak, and Kaguya was one of them, and I remember getting sort of like, this is nothing like I've seen anything before, because it's very it sort of like breaks them all in terms of animation and the style of and it's more, how should I put it, it's like if you see these old paintings on a wall becoming alive and tell your story, becomes almost holographic and tells a story in itself instead of just being silent and still, because it's a beautiful movie in itself, even though it's not a traditional 3D or 2D look.
Yeah, it's very stylistic, I should say. The art style is the first thing that stands out once you watch this movie. It is gorgeous in its simplicity, but also the level of detail that's still in this film is incredible. It's one of the most unique art styles I've seen in a while. Um, I think that just helps enhance like the fairy tale element of this entire movie. It's very like if Studio Ghibli made a Disney movie, this would be it, essentially, right?
Yeah,
It's much more of a traditional princess story than like Princess Mononoke, for example.
yeah.
Yeah,
And do you know who the director is for this movie? Just out of curiosity.
I don't, because this for me this is actually my first time watching it. Like most things we cover here on the channel, so I just went to HBO Max. It's streaming there at the time of recording this, so you guys check it out. I just went to HBO Max, booted it up, and was amazed by what I was watching. So who was the director?
Isao Takahata. And if some might recognize that name, it's the director of Grave of the Fireflies.
Oh, jeez.
And I would argue that it kind of shows in some aspects because of how they tell the story. Because
Hmm.
it doesn't tell the story in a traditional essence, even if it's more, like you said, the more traditional princess story than Princess Mononoke, or to some extent, folk argue, Spirited Away.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, that's very interesting that you bring that up because I can kind of see that style as you mentioned it. Very different subject matter, of course, way more lighthearted in tone than that
Yeah,
first film, but yeah, that's
it
interesting. That
was.
just shows the range, right?
It was his first film in 14 years,
Wow. I mean, came
if I'm
back
not
with a bang,
mistaken.
I'd say.
Yeah, and I do believe that this movie was also nominated for Best Animated Movie back then. I'm gonna double check that right now.
While you double check that, I just want to point out that the voice cast for this movie is phenomenal. Like
Uh,
just about all Ghibli movies. Sorry, go ahead, Isaac.
yeah, but go on. I was just looking through it, but so go on.
Okay. So like most Ghibli movies, I believe Disney handled the dub for this one. Am I correct?
They usually they have pretty much done it for every
Yeah.
one.
So in the dub, Chloe Grace Moretz voices Princess Kaguya, which is awesome. But also, the late James Caan voices the bamboo cutter, who passed away
And
just recently. So that's that hit me kind of hard hearing his voice in this movie because again, at the time of recording this, he passed away like a week ago or so, which is wild. But yeah, it's a great voice cast in both the sub and the dub. So whichever version you choose, you're gonna get a fantastic cast. Did you find it, Isaac?
I'm just reading through it, and it was it got some awards, but it was more uh, what's there was more Japanese movie movie awards. Although this is a movie that has is one of the few that has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that should say something.
Yeah, right. It's right up there with Toy Story, which is great. It's at 100% by critics, 90% by audience. I think the story is very touching, right? Because like we start the movie off. This is a mostly spoiler free review, by the way, so you should be good. But I'm just saying, we start the movie off from the perspective of the bamboo cutter and his wife, right? And we kind of see Princess Kaguya as a supporting character and like a mystery to us. And I thought that was really interesting how you frame the movie from that perspective. And then it starts to change as the story goes along, as Kaguya, the princess, becomes a more main focus and becomes the focal point of the story. I just think that was, again, like you were saying before, Isaac, the director shows a really interesting way to tell this story. Like he could have done this very straight by the numbers, but the way it's delivered, it's literally like narrated to you like it's a fairy tale or a bedtime story, which I think is awesome. And I just think that was a very cool framing device and kind of ushers you into this fantastical world that is very bright, very colorful, but also, like we said earlier, the art style is just so unique, it grabs you right away.
Yeah, it's arguably one of the biggest strengths in within the Ghibli movies. I would argue. Sure, some looks more like the other Ghibli movies, but they are so distinct in comparison to other animated movies in general. It's
Mhm.
something about when a show or a movie has their distinct art style. There is some griping towards it. I mean, look at Klaus, the animated Netflix movie, Christmas movie that came out last year, or Arcane is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Yes, they're 2D. they are two different types of stories and all that. Yes, but it's what I'm trying to say, that it's refreshing now when someone is trying something new, but they is still being sort of traditional. Then just we are doing it CGI because it's and yes, the stereotypical CGI because that's quote unquote cheaper or something. Yes, I'm looking at you, Dragon Ball Super superheroes.
Oh man, yeah, I'm with you though. Like I think that's again the strength of 2D animation, right? You can do 2D and it can look like Spirited Away, or it can look like The Tale of Princess Kaguya, or it can look like Dragon Ball Z. And those are very different styles. And I'm glad you mentioned how Studio Ghibli kind of changes the visual language for each film, because as much as we love Disney, Disney has fallen into the trap of everything's going to be CGI from here on out. And I feel
Yeah,
like that's a mistake to just say that. If you're going to do mostly CGI movies, that's totally fine. I have a problem with that. Disney movies are gorgeous. I love them. But it'd be nice to have a 2D movie once in a while, you know?
yeah,
just to
exactly.
vary it up a little bit.
And I dare argue that anime movies like the My Hero, World's Mission, or the recent Jujutsu Kaisen, and does prove that 2D there is a market for 2D animation.
Oh yeah, I mean, animation was always 2D, so it was always a market for it. That's why it's
Yeah,
just really weird for me to me that they decided to pivot that hard. I'm not trying to make this a Disney conversation and distract too much, but for them to come out and say we're done with 2D animation was just a really weird move to me by an animation studio. uh,
yeah.
that's strange. But back to the Tale of Princess Kaguya. Like, what were your thoughts, Isaac? Again, we're trying to remain mostly spoiler free, but like, what are your thoughts on like the overall story of this girl who grows out of a bamboo stalk, and all of a sudden she's a princess and she enters the lives of this bamboo cutter and his wife? It's very fantastical, but it's still very like rooted in reality once you kind of get away from that plot line.
I would argue that it's a simple and rather generic answer, I know, but it's cute. Like most of Studio Ghibli's movies, outside of Grave of the Fireflies,
Ooh, yeah, we don't talk
uh,
about that one too often.
or Princess Mononoke. Uh, but it's a cute. They argue that it's a cute movie. It's an just I wouldn't say that it's sort of like My Neighbor Totoro, which is just you can sort of like, I dare argue you can easily, if you have a 4-year-old or something, you can easily just uh, kick it off, also turn it on the screen, and it's just harmless fun to them to watch. But considering it's a more complicated story than that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's if I wanted to introduce how should I put it, if I want to introduce if I would introduce well a 7-year-old to Studio Ghibli, and I had to someone said start with the Princess Kaguya, that would maybe not be my first choice personally, but I would see why some would like to introduce it with it, because it's an easy it's an easy is it an easy swallow, or okay, that sounds wrong out of context, but
Phrasing.
yeah, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, it's an easy breezy watch. Essentially,
Yeah,
is what you're
it's easy
saying.
to dissect. That's what I mean. It's
Yeah,
easy to dissect.
it's very straightforward with its story. There is a twist or a revelation that happens like a little over halfway through this movie where I'm just like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know how I feel about that, but that's really interesting. And then the ending of this movie is something else. I will just put it that way. The movie grows up. It becomes mature as it goes along, just like the princess as she grows up throughout the course of this film. And so the themes are still what we come to expect from Studio Ghibli. They're still fairly uh, accessible for children, but there's still deeper meanings and ideas that are being worked in the story. And you really feel that once you get to the end of the movie, like the idea of responsibility, the idea of, desire, want, all these interesting themes of family as well. What does it mean to be a family? What does it mean to do right by your loved ones and not be selfish? Is a major idea that is played up in the Tale of Princess Kaguya. And it's just really fascinating to see how it all plays out.
So what you're saying is that you really enjoyed this movie.
I liked it. It's not without its faults, and we can get into that now. The movie is good. Out of everything we've said, like the last 16 minutes or so about it is correct. I think pacing wise, it can be a little better, a little tighter. Like once you get into the second act, it feels like it drags on a bit for me, and I found myself getting distracted as it went on. What were you about to say, Isaac? I hear you going.
I don't know. I can see what you mean, but it could be a bit tighter. But in comparison to other stuff that I watch when it comes to Japanese animation, I don't really would say that I would personally had a problem with that.
That's fine.
But I can see at the same time.
It's not that the movie itself is slow. I think, again, the premise is fairly simple in nature, that taking 2 hours, 17 minutes to tell that story, I feel like could have been done in 2 hours, 45 minutes. That's just me. Like, I feel like you could get the same idea and point across tighter. Not that they were wasting time and like scenes were dragging on for far too long throughout the entire movie, but I feel like the concept is so simple. You could have done this in a smaller amount of time. Again, movie's still great. I just think pacing, it lost me personally a little bit, like in the second act, halfway through the movie. But again, that's just how I felt watching it. You guys might feel completely different. Isaac, I can tell you kind of disagree there, so that's totally cool. I understand.
It's just a personal reaction to it. Thinking, just looking back at it a bit, I can understand where I'm coming from. So it's not that I'm disagreeing with you. It's just that I'm having the same issue. If that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, that's fine. I totally get it. So for me, watching these Ghibli movies, because again, I've not seen most of these movies. I'm really just watching them as we go along, which is kind of fun. So it's really cool seeing another princess movie, because again, I still say that, funny enough, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is still my favorite of the princess themed Ghibli movies. Neighbor Totoro is my favorite overall. It's just really fascinating seeing their take on that genre of films, again, here in the West compared to Disney, which dominates that genre basically since before we all were alive.
Yeah, Disney certainly has good. What would I call it? A good whole of that market here in the West. That's for certain.
They definitely own the princess department. To the point where it's weird seeing movies for like Snow White and the Huntsman. It's like, who's making a Snow White movie and you're not Disney? That's weird, man.
Yeah, I mean, it is in what's this called, public domain now.
Yeah, almost everything Disney did was public domain, which is like Winnie the Pooh, all the princess stories, Peter Pan, but again, like they took those properties and made them their own, and it's so ingrained into the Disney brand that it's weird when another company tries to touch it.
Now I'm just thinking about the upcoming Winnie the Pooh movie that we probably have to cover with Jayla in a Chatter After episode whenever that happens.
Oh, jeez. One day. Isaac, did you have anything else on the tale of Princess Kaguya?
No, not about. I can think of it. It would if we did more spoilers, then it would probably a bit much. But since we want it to be spoiler free, I feel it.
Well, do you want to add a spoiler section?
No,
Okay.
I'm good on that regard.
Sorry, folks, if you wanted it. If you did, let us know in the comments, and we may come back and revisit and do a spoiler review for you. But yeah, like again, we both love this movie. I think Isaac may enjoy it a little bit more than me, but it's still, again, it's 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. It still gets a passing grade as far as I'm concerned. It's another fantastic film in the Ghibli library that you can get on HBO Max. Isaac, it's been awesome talking anime with you, man. Always is.
I'd argue that the only bad Ghibli movie is the 3D animated movie that they tried to make. That one is horrible.
I keep seeing that one get recommended to me through HBO Max, and Christian keeps warning me off. We probably have to cover it at some point, right? Like, I'm gonna have to see it one day.
I've seen Sword Art Online, so but that movie is at least a movie, not a show.
And if you guys have also seen Sword Art Online, those episodes are being uploaded here on the YouTube channel for the Amateur Otaku, so make sure you check those out. If you're listening to us in the podcast feed, they're already there. Isaac goes off in every single episode of Sword Art Online. It's honestly hilarious.
And it's getting worse by the episode.
You just see his descent further and further into madness. That's why he tortures Brandon so much on this channel.
Yeah, I know.
It's so funny. But Isaac, where can people find you, my man?
Well, they can find my work at Phobum Entertainment, and they can find me at Emblemaniac on Twitter, and they can find the pod over at the Amateur Otaku Pod on Twitter.
Exactly. You can find us at Amateur Otaku Pod on the Twitter, and you can find Brandon, who's not here today, at the Scarlet Fan 52 on Twitter as well, and of course here on the podcast. As for me, you can find me at Novice Cinephile everywhere: TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram at the Novice Cinephile, and of course our other podcast, the Chatter After, where we cover all things movies, TV, breaking down all our favorite moments, trying to analyze what they capture. It's a fantastic show. Check it out wherever you get your podcast or on youtube.com/Novice Cinephile. I think that's a wrap, Isaac, on the Tale of Princess Kaguya. It's fun.
Yeah, it's always fun.
It's a great movie, guys. Check it out. Again, it is streaming on HBO Max. Until next
Netflix
time.
there.
Oh, or Netflix. Awesome. Multiple ways to watch this movie. Peace.
Yeah, peace.